Okay, so good afternoon to each of you. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Today, as I said, today is going to be relatively short because I really just want to talk a little bit about the situation that's happening now. It today is May the 20th. Today is May the 20th, and if you remember, this stuff, this COVID-19 thing, you know, January, we weren't so sure. It seemed like it was just something that may have been happening in China. February, we were not so sure because we went ahead and kept Carnival anyway. March, we decided, hey, this thing is really, really, really serious. We need to treat with it as if it is a serious issue. So we started locking down. We started closing our borders. We started telling people you only go to work if you are one of those essential workers and so forth. The government, in its wisdom back then, it was very clear that for this to work, we needed to people needed social support. People needed social support for this to work. And the government, because the government was telling us that we needed to stay home, because the government was telling us that we can't go to work, we are not supposed to be out and about, we are supposed to be social distancing and all of that good stuff. Because the government was telling us all of that, they were the ones who was responsible for providing the social support that is needed to deal with this. They promised us that they would help with salaries. They promised us, well, the first thing they promised us was this pandemic leave. And if you all recognize the whole pandemic leave, well, we're still not sure what that even means and how that is going to materialize and all of that stuff. We still really have no idea how all of that is to work or anything like that. But say what? It is there. We don't know how it's working, and whatever. They then came and they promised us to do. They then came and they told us there are all of these grants that you can get. There are all of these grants that you can get, and you just need to apply. It's going to be simple, it's going to be easy, and it is fine. We could work this through together. We all agreed, sure, we will do this. Sure, let's work with the government. The government said they would help take care of us and so forth. In Tobago, there were three, and I'm going to be very clear, but there were three specific kinds of grants that we could access. One was the Ministry of Social Development grant. We all remember where that started off with this ridiculous forms, where there were two forms, one if you are self-employed and the other if you are employed, but because of COVID, you can't work. That form was originally ridiculous. You needed to go and find two references to have them sign. You needed to get your workplace or whatever to send you a letter. You needed to do all kind of hoopla. That Ministry of Social Development grant, because we complained so much about how unrealistic the requirements were for that grant, they finally changed the form and simplified the form significantly so that we could get it, access it easier. Because the whole idea of going and the whole idea of having to find two people to sign up your form as referencing and so forth, those were just unrealistic requirements, and they finally changed those. Thank God. We spoke up, they changed the forms. So you have the social development forms, that grant, and with social development, you were allowed to get 1,005 salary relief. You were allowed to apply for rental assistance if you have an apartment that you were renting, but because you are now not working, you can't pay the rent, and you would get a food card. So those were the three options that you could apply for via Ministry of Social Development. Uh, Ministry of Finance then came and said, because again, we are sending people home because we have all of these issues, you can get an National Insurance Board grant, which is another 1,005. However, you only get that if you were employed and you were making your NIS, NIB contributions. That form has gone in for so many people. A couple people have received that one. I do think a couple people have received that one. And then in Tobago, we discovered that there was the form in Tobago that the Tobago House of Assembly, through the Division of Finance and the Economy, there is a emergency assistance form, for want of a better term, that the Tobago House of Assembly has been administering. Because the Tobago House of Assembly has been administering that, one of the easiest things they've been doing is giving food cards. Apparently, they had food cards from before, and that they were just continuing that process of giving out these emergency one-time food cards that were $500 or something like that, to that effect. Hi, good afternoon, Shaquille. I saw your message. I would send it to you. So those were the three options that we have in Tobago as it relates to receiving social support from the government. The government meaning the ministry, the government meaning the Tobago House of Assembly, the government. I am sure you all have, if you're in Tobago, you have been following the whole fiasco with the food cards that were distributed, where we have one set of people saying that people are coming into the electoral district and distributing food cards, and they didn't have the authority, and all kind of hoopla and all sorts of bacchanal as it relates to these food cards. My colleague and I have publicly stated from forever that any distribution of food cards needed to have been done by the people who are responsible for the social support, so our social workers, because we had already promised, and that's another thing. Remember, we were promised that if you were a child, if you had a child that was getting school feeding in school, you would either get a top up on your food card if you already had a food card from before, or you would get a new food card if you had not been on the food card program before this whole COVID-19 thing. We see that that was a whole different set of bacchanal again, and they've finally gotten to the point where I think they are resolving that part, because as I said weeks ago, what should have happened is that should not have been in the hands of the MPs at all. That should have been in the hands of the Division of Education, working with the principals, working with the social workers and the counselors in the school and so forth, to identify which of these students need food cards, which of these students may not absolutely need it because their family situation doesn't require them to absolutely need the food card right now. And that should have been taken out of the hands of the politicians. Now, I am a politician. It has taken me 3 years to get to the point of being able to say, I, Faith Brebner, I, Faith B. Israel, am a politician without cringing. Because I'm beginning to understand this whole thing about politics. Sure, I understand that politicians need to take care of their people and they need to show that they are providing support. So sure, I have no issue with the politicians getting a few food cards to give out. I have no issue with that. But the bulk of the food cards should have been given out using a very strict, using a very rigid kind of social support assessment. Because remember, it is the government who told people, I am asking you to stay home. I am asking you to keep your children home. And because I am doing that to protect the public health, I will also support you through this process. And again, this is not just in Trinidad and Tobago. This kind of complete economic fall is happening all over the world. It's happening all over the world. Um, so we have been speaking out about that from the beginning and speaking about the fact that we should be using some kind of system that is apolitical to determine who gets what. So this whole issue about the food card is ridiculous. It is ridiculous that we are going through this right now, and it is silly. Yes, Shelly Ann, I agree that it is ridiculous that all of this bacchanal is going on with people who are in the same party who should be working together. Ridiculous, ridiculous. And it's, that thing about the MP staff doing means tests and the applicants are then getting denied even after. I have heard stories about similar things where even the individuals who seem to need it, who seem to be very good candidates for these social supports, are not getting them because, again, it is going through the political eye, which makes no sense. This is not a time, and yes, this is not a time as a politician. I am going to say this is not a time to play politics with these things, because the same way there are PNM people who need support, there are non-PNM people. There are people who have no political affiliation. There are people who support very openly the PDP who need the support. And this needed to have been something that is done equitably throughout the island, throughout the country, so that everybody who needs the support gets it. And that is why many weeks ago, I was very clear when I called for a COVID social support task force to be created within the THA that would include Division of Health, Wellness and Family Development, the social set people. It would include education people. It would include ComDev people, because ComDev has the links with the community organizations that are already working in the communities, already have their target audience. And it would include representatives from all of these entities. And even if the central government was saying we are going to send the food cards via the MPs, then sure, they would just be the conduit to bring the food cards and say, hey, these are the criteria our task force has developed. And because we know Tobago and because we know our people in Tobago, we would be able to work it out and work it out quickly. I said this about a month ago. I don't know if that task force was created. I don't think it was. We now have a assistant secretary with responsibility for social services, which is fine. That's wonderful. But remember, even before that, we had one. Mr. Dennis was the assistant secretary in the Division of Health, Wellness and Family Development before he was given the post of chief secretary. So there should have always been leadership in Tobago to ensure that this process was well worked out. And yes, I agree with you, Shakil. All of this would have been prevented if they were given whether it was given from wherever. And there's a part that I am seeing on the screen that you said proper protocols and assessments should have been enforced and followed. That has been my point from the beginning. If we are using a means test, if we are using a means assessment, whatever it is we are using, we are all using it so that we know that it is a coordinated effort, because we also don't want a situation where three different entities see that this one family needs assistance and that family gets the assistance from the three different entities. We also don't want that, because we want to ensure that we spread all of the support that is out there, we spread it all over. That is what we needed to do, and that is what the task force should have been working on from the beginning. Now, the other thing that is sad, and I think Tobagonians are finally recognizing it. I said it before, but I think Tobagonians are finally now recognizing it. When I saw originally that there was an email address for the Ministry of Social Development forms, that was a Tobago. So they had it in regions, and there was a Tobago email address. I automatically assumed that that meant those forms were going to Tobago, and that the social workers and so forth in Tobago would be responsible for doing the assessment and then determining of the people who applied who qualifies. I quickly learned that that was not happening. In fact, instead of that going to Tobago, and even though hundreds of people have been dropping off their form at the Division of Health, Wellness, and Family Development, Tobagonians did not know that all that those officers at the Division of Health, Wellness, and Family Development were doing was scanning those forms and sending them to Trinidad. So we have perfectly competent social support staff here in Tobago, whether they are social workers, whether they are counselors, whether they are whoever they are all here in Tobago. And all that they have been doing as it relates to this for the last month and a half, 2 months, because we are now in May. All that they have been doing has been scanning those forms and sending them to Trinidad. Excuse me. And on top of all of that, madness, we would recognize last week, or maybe it was early this week, that no one has gotten any rental assistance. And by the way, I am getting the calls. I am getting the calls of people who are messaging me and calling me and telling me their landlord is telling them that they have to go. Their landlord is telling them they are not even giving them the information, because they give the information to a couple other people and they didn't get any money. It's a month, 2 months after. The landlord is telling them, put in, if you pay $1,000 out of the amount, I would not put your. But then when they're just about to put the $1,000, they realize, wait, the landlord or they come in with another story, and there is so much upheaval, there is so much mental anguish, there is so much madness that is happening as a result of this, that this is just proving that we've had little or no leadership as it relates to this in Tobago. And I've said from the beginning, I really do not care what they do in Trinidad, because they can figure it out. They can figure it out. I am here to represent the people of Tobago. And if it's not working for the people who I represent, then we need to figure out how to fix it. And on top of everything, they finally came out and admitted, they finally admitted, either last week or early this week, and I'll show you the clip, that they have actually started doing the process of doing the assessment in Trinidad, but because of some level of fraud, they've basically stopped everything. And they are being sent back to Tobago now for the same workers who didn't have the competence but to upload the forms for the last month and a half. Those same workers now are now going to be asked to do the assessment. Let me pull up the clip so that nobody says faith, so you all hear it out of their mouths. Cindy's saying some landlords are not giving out their information because they are not that registered. And that is something that is also important, because I do know that some landlords are refusing to give out their information. One, because of the VAT registration thing, but the other thing is, remember the whole thing about property tax? And remember, what is it, 3 years ago, they were big on the whole property tax thing. And then we recognize that if you have a regular home all by yourself, just a regular residential place, the tax you would have to pay would be one thing. But if you're renting a room or an apartment in your building, then that now changes the category of your property. So the tax you pay is no longer residential, but now business and all of that hoopla. So we have all of these things happening. Let me share with you what the Assistant Secretary with responsibility for, I guess, social development said at the press conference on Monday.
Processing of grants to people in Tobago has been derailed due to fraudulent activities by some applicants. This from Assistant Secretary of Health, Wellness and Family Development, Nadine Stewart-Phillips, during the division's response to COVID-19 briefing today. Earlier this month, the Minister of Social Development and Family Services, Camille Robinson-Regis, said the ministry had to do site visits before paying landlords the rental assistance grants, as many applicants were not truthful in their applications. Mahalia Joseph Wharton has more.
Assistant Secretary of Health, Wellness and Family Development Nadine Stewart-Phillips said the same verification process done in Trinidad with site visits will now be conducted in Tobago to ensure that the information being provided in the rent assistance applications are accurate.
We know that the process is taking longer than it should, but there is a lot of work happening in the background at this time so that the applications can be honored in the shortest time possible. I'm advised that there has been approximately 2,000 applications that were received at the ministry from Tobagonians. From this, 565 applicants were uploaded directly from the Division of Health, Wellness and Family Development.
She said on Friday a decision was taken to give the division access to the ministry's database to deal with the 2,000 applications for the various grants directly.
And that would ensure that we take some of the work off of the Ministry of Social Development. So the verification process for the rental assistance for Tobagonians will be done by the division, and of course it will be sent back to the ministry to help accelerate this process. Our most urgent priority at this time is increasing coverage in response to this crisis.
In the meantime, the division has still tried to assist some families.
She said that at a press conference on Monday. And as you heard, on Friday, they made the decision to have Tobago do this. On Friday, they made the decision to have Tobago do this. So all of March, all of April, and we are now, today's what, the 20th of May. Friday, and let me check to see what date Friday was, because Friday was the 15th of May. Friday is when they decided to have the THA jump in to assist with these assessments and verification and whatnot. 2 months ago, I said it. A month ago, I said it. We should have taken responsibility for doing exactly this a month ago, 2 months ago, so that by now people would have gotten the support that they are looking for. This is not that difficult. We are in Trinidad and Tobago. We know that there are people who are fraudulent. We know this. We know this. The site visits should have been a built in part of the assessment if you wanted to do this. But that should have started a month, 2 months ago. We shouldn't, at this point, now making that policy decision to go and start that process. It means that all of those people, and I have helped them, I have helped quite a bit of people complete those forms and send them in. My colleagues have helped complete those forms and send them in. As a matter of fact, Assemblyman Farley has been driving around his electoral district, picking up forms from people, going to his office, being at his office till 2, 3, 4 in the morning, uploading to send to Trinidad. And we are now realizing why no one has actually gotten the support in the first place. Diane is saying, personally, I think that the THA should be doing when there is an office here in Tobago that deals with the, I think you mean shouldn't be, when there is an office in Tobago that deals with the applications. And I agree with you 100%. As a matter of fact, when I heard about the food card part of it, I simply assumed that it was the Ministry of Social Development's Tobago office that was doing it. Because remember, the Ministry of Social Development in Tobago already has an office that processes food cards, already has an office that has the names of everybody in Tobago who is getting food cards, the name of everybody in Tobago who has recently applied. So that would have been a good place to do the process to say, well, okay, if we already have these 1,000 people with food cards in Tobago. We know that we are just doing the top up for those people. Now let's think about the students who are in families that don't already have food cards. We work with the Division of Education to identify who those are. So we know, well, of the students who already have, of the students who take school feeding, for example, of those, they are, some of them are already in families that get food cards, so we don't have to worry about them. They get in their automatic top up. But these people, these on the other side, are the ones who we now need to worry about and then work through education, social development, and even the division to get that going. Listen to me. This, as a politician, I am telling you that this should have never been in the hands of politicians. As a matter of, that is just too much work. That is, as a politician, I am telling you, that is too much work for you to do it correctly, unless you just give in to everybody for you to do that kind of assessment correctly. The offices of none of these politicians' offices have the kinds of staff to do that kind of means testing, to do that kind of analysis to say, well, yes, so need it and so don't. This should not have been in the arms of politicians in the first place. So, sure, I'll go back to my first statement where I said, sure, because it's politics and because, it is what it is. Because I get the politicians, you see the original 50 that they gave each of the MPs and so forth. Sure, you get the politicians a little bit to say, well, let me just say I have a couple of food cards so I can give to people who I know, people who I feel need it. But the bulk of these things should not have been in the hands of politicians at all, because there are competent people who could do it. And then going back to this foolishness now, where the same competent people are now going to have to start over the process in Tobago. And when Mrs. Stewart Phillips said this on Monday, I heard it and it went through I heard it, I thought, well, what she said, they ain't really making no sense. What it means, so they now start, they're basically starting over. And then they sent out this press release today, in essence verifying that yes, what she said on Monday really is what's happening, and that the process really is totally delayed. Now, we have not had any confirmed cases of COVID-19 for the last 2 or 3 weeks. Thank God. God really is a Trinity, and we good for the most part. I mean, I personally think, as you've heard me say a million times, that we need to test more people and expand the testing and all of that. But for the people who we've been testing, there are no cases, which means just now, we are going to be opening up, opening up, opening up, lifting restrictions, lifting restrictions, lifting restrictions. And all of these people who have been waiting patiently for the last 2 months, by that time, because by the time this finished, by the time this process, you see this process that they're talking about here, by the time that finished, we're already the 20th of May. By the time that finished, May done. Which means for some of these people, they would have owed 2 or 3 months rent. So their landlords probably have already, by the end of this month, put them out while we are now figuring out this mess. And he said it, I said it from day one. That assessment should have been done, and every day a batch of 10, 15, 20 come in, you go through it quickly. Even if you take your time and do it, sure. But 2 months later, we would have been somewhere further than where we are right now. And that is why you see this kind of delay in the social support. That is not helping the situation. That is not making our economic situation any better, and it is certainly not making our social, our psychosocial response to this thing better. Because we now have people, I have people calling me all the time, telling me, asking me what are they going to do. They have children, they have baby, they have this, they have. If it was them alone, they really wouldn't have mind. But they have. What are they going to do with the things that they have? And in some instances, you can't even, yes, we are asking the landlords to be lenient, but maybe the landlord, the rent is their main source of income too. Maybe the rent is their main source of income too. So you can't really ask them to be too lenient when you don't know what their situation is. Everybody needs the support. Everybody needs the support. And I would go back to, I know we just want to vex when we compare ourselves to other places, but there are times where you need to look at best practice and try to emulate best practice. In Canada, there was a website that you go to. There were 2 or 3 options in terms of which kind of support you get. You go in, you fill out the form on the website. Granted, the website crashed a couple times, but they were able to fix that. Again, every, nowhere is perfect. Same thing happened in Jamaica too. They were using the website, and the website in Jamaica crashed a couple times. But so no see. In Canada, within 2 or 3 days, the people actually got the whatever it was in their accounts. As a matter of fact, because some of the process, because some people were not sure when they had gone through the process, it was so quick and so easy. They were not sure whether they had completed it or not. Some people did it more than once, and they got monies in their accounts more than once. And the Canadian government basically said, we understand there are some of you who got the payment twice. Don't even worry about it. We're gonna figure it out. When we finish dealing with COVID, we would figure it out. That was their response. Because there was an understanding that this kind of situation requires a swift response because of all of the other economic and all of the other socio issues relating to not having access to money. Because we're talking about, issues with domestic violence and all those other things that I don't want to go into now, when you deal with the fact that people may not have money, they may not have food, they don't know what is happening. Times are just different, and you now have people who have to deal with everything else. The children home, oh God, all the children them home making a whole set of noise. You who barely went to school yourself now have to teach your child. And on top of all of that, your landlord calling you. On top of all of that, when you get the one food card and you go to one store, the one store telling you They're not accepting that food card there, so you have to go to another and another and another. All of these little things that we could have prevented if we had just sat down and thought through the process up front. Granted, I didn't say everything would have worked well. I didn't say everything would have worked well, but we also have a hotline. We have a hotline where people are calling and giving and asking questions and so forth. So part of that task force should have been to continually get feedback from the hotline to say, what are people calling about? What are people asking about? Where are people having issues? So that the task force should have been able to quickly troubleshoot and fix it. We are 2 months into this. 2 months into this, and the Division of Health, Wellness, and Family Development are now telling us that Friday, the 15th of May, they just made a decision, or a decision was made to have them now start to do the assessment. Makes absolutely no sense. And this is not how governance should be working. This is not how governance should be working. It shouldn't. Shakil says the THA version is supposed to be an extension of the ministry and is duly a one-time card as opposed to a monthly disbursement by the ministry. And see, that's the other thing too. One of the things I was wondering was, yeah, so sure, I am happy that the THA one-time food card was coming faster, because it seemed like if we were waiting for the food card from the ministry, it wasn't coming. It wasn't coming at all. But again, this goes back to all of us working together, and that is where we are saying, okay, part of that task force would have been with the ministers, would have been with the social development, so that we know, okay, we're sending 1,000 cards to Tobago. If THA then realizes that the 1,000 cards are coming to Tobago not enough, then we could say, okay, let us use out of our money. And again, let me just say quickly, the Tobago House of Assembly was created so that we can make some policy and financial decisions for ourselves. If we recognize very early up that what they're doing in Trinidad not enough, or the amount of food cards they were doing in Trinidad is only for a certain amount, and we know we needed more here or whatever, we could have made policy decisions in Tobago to then use. Listen, we canceled jazz, right? We canceled jazz. Last year, the year before, jazz cost us 13, 12, $13 million. We could have made a policy decision in Tobago to use the 2020 jazz money to treat with this, or the Tobago Heritage Festival money, or whatever, all of the things that we are now canceling because of COVID that we had budgeted for, that we had already gotten money for, we could have made the decision to use that money for these things. Or better yet, I don't know if you all recognize, every single time a member of the media asked about the monies from the Heritage and Stabilization Fund and how much money was coming to Tobago versus how much was going to Trinidad, the ministers in Trinidad would always say that they had made an application to the Ministry of Finance to get money from the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. And if the THA wanted money from the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, they should also make that request. That has been the answer all the time, which means it seems that we have not made that request. 2.5 months later, and we still trying to figure this out. This is not acceptable, and we should not accept this from those who are there, who we've tasked with the responsibility of taking care of us, taking care of all of us, not just your people or not just my people, but everybody needs to be taken care of. Because if we're not careful, the outcome of this, when we come out of COVID-19, we are going to have to deal with the repercussions of having a period where people are coming out with post-traumatic stress disorder. Don't think post-traumatic stress disorder is only applicable when you have war and that kind of thing. No. What is happening on the ground here, this uncertainty of our world, this thing where we are not sure who has it, who didn't have it, whether we have people living or dead, whether our families, families in the US who have died and we're still having to deal with that. All of these things are going to come back to bite us psychologically later if we don't treat with these things well right now. So, guys, thank you all so much for tuning in. I just wanted to express how I was feeling about this right now because I am frustrated. Imagine it, I have been getting my stipend because the little bit of money I just get is a stipend. I have been getting it every month, and I am still frustrated because I get the calls all the time. I get the calls all the time about the other people on the ground who need the support and are not getting it. This is not good enough. And when it ain't good enough, we have to be able to stand up and say, hey, this ain't good enough. We need to do better than this. We need to do better than this. And we can do better than this. We have the capacity to do better than this. We just need to actually think a little bit, think out of the box, and do it. All right, guys. So thank you all so much. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Share the live again with other people who may have been wondering what's happening, and we go from there. Hopefully by the end of the week they have some new information for us. Hopefully there'll be some relief coming soon. We could just hope. We could just hope and pray. All right, guys. Thank you. Have a blessed evening. Bye.